Welcome back to another episode of the ADP Average Dudes podcast with your Average Dude host, Tanner Ward and Matt Mormon.
Hello.
We are excited to have you back for another episode. Today we are looking at draft formats and what our strategy is in those formats. We're looking at fab versus waivers, small leagues versus large leagues, small bench versus large bench, best ball drafts, guillotines, auctions, and so on. Before we hop into that, stop whatever you're doing right now. Go follow us on Twitter at ADP Dudes so you never miss when a new episode is released. You can go vote on our polls, like which host had the better best ball draft, which we're hopefully going to wrap up today. Also, you can see our beautiful faces on the YouTube channel. Go find us at Average Dudes Podcast or simply search ADP Dudes and subscribe. All right, Matt, let's talk about formats.
Let's talk about formats. I just pulled up the best ball teams there quickly for those who are watching on YouTube. I'll bring those back up a little bit later again.
I do want to say I think you're going to win the poll because I think your team is more eye appealing.
Let me just bring it back up there for a second. So I think
your receivers,
right,
and because we're it's a double flex, 2 receiver double flex. We'll talk about double flexes today.
Yep.
We all have 4 receivers in those spots.
Yes, as I think you should.
And yours are more sexy than mine. Also, I think the general public is more on Fields than Tua. Now, you have more draft capital in those 5 spots. Like, that was how you started your draft, was 4 receivers and Fields.
I went very much 0 RB.
Yes, and I went hero RB with Kelsey in there.
Right.
So, but I think yours is going to win because I think your team's a little bit more sexier, more appealing to the eye. Now, I will say, I think they're both very nice teams.
Yeah, I like both of them quite a bit too. I think they're both really good. We'll talk about best ball specific kind of things you look for in that. I think both of us really hit a lot of those things. The one thing I do like about my team is in best ball, I think it's nice to have a stack. I've got a DJ Moore, Justin Fields stack.
Yep.
You've got Tua, but you did not land Tyreek or Jalen.
I did not, but my second quarterback, I did get a stack because.
Oh, you did. I didn't see that. Yeah.
So I knew I was going to have a choice at stack because I have Olave, I took Amon-Ra, and I took Lockett. So I knew one of my QB2s was going to be Geno, Carr, or Goff. Goff was who I really wanted more. I reached for him. I had to sacrifice Kendre Miller to get him, but I was like, I think the drop off from Goff to the next 2 guys was worth it. I definitely did not want to end up with Derek Carr. So I did end up with a stack. Now, this best ball, which made this one fun, is that most of these guys don't play best ball. It was a big kind of mesh of different friend groups and people that aren't normally in leagues together. So that's what made this one kind of fun. But your normal best ball strategies weren't in there. It wasn't as heavy focused on stacks. And I think that made it kind of more fun because as I'm doing more underdogs and DraftKings, most of those people are really focused on stacking everything. This one was kind of fun to just have a slow draft. Like I said, you have I had a different variety of people than what I normally play with. And yeah, I think it made it fun other than 2 people kind of holding the draft hostage through most of the draft. But other than that, it was a fun one. So, and I do like how my team turned out.
Real quick, I'm going to make my final pick. And one thing, again, maybe I should have saved this for part of the best ball specific part. But I think this is a fun little teaser to get into it. So one thing,
Matt, you've been on the clock. You've been on the clock for an hour now.
Well, we've been podcasting for like an hour now, haven't we, Tanner? So I held off until we were recording this episode. And one thing that's important for best ball to remember is there's really no transactions during the season. We talked about we might do one round of waivers mid-season, which I think is a fun way to mix it up.
Yeah.
But because there's none, and I've only got one quarterback, with this final pick, I am forced into quarterback, and I will take Brock Purdy.
Very nice. And I'm going to be up pretty quick because
you sure are.
We had 3 people that just set their queue up and went to auto draft.
I think Cody's back, though, so I don't know. You may not be up as quickly as you think. I'll let you know if you're up, though. I'll keep it.
He's been picking pretty quick, so I'm probably going to be up. I might wait till our best ball selection to make a pick. What's been fun is since I'm commissioning it, I've texting everyone when they're up. And we have a group chat with about half of the people, and obviously they're like, why are you texting me right when I'm on the clock? It's a slow draft. And so every time I'm up, they just blow up the group text of Tanner, you're up, pick. So I have like 8 messages in the first 3 minutes I'm on the clock. Was at the dog park today, did not even know I was on the clock for like a half hour. And yeah, I had like 12 messages on my phone.
Well, and
so that's been kind of fun.
This actually is kind of a bit of a format talk here, talking about slow drafts. And I am just a naturally patient person.
I am not.
Exactly. And there's 2 sides of the slow draft spectrum. I like, I don't mind if it takes a day to get through 3 picks, whatever. It's July right now.
Yeah, it's July.
So I don't care. Now, as we get closer to the season, sure, there's a bit of nerves, hey, are we going to finish this thing in time, right? I definitely do not mind. I think if you are in a slow draft, though, it is take the responsibility to have your notifications on for that league, for that draft. Yep. And, take your time, look at the situation, don't rush into a pick, but do show the, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just responsibility.
Well, show the initiative that you want to be a part of the draft. That's the biggest thing with me is the reason we do slow drafts, and I love slow drafts in the off season. They're so much fun because it gives you something to do in June and July. And, maybe you throw a couple bucks down on a league. We did $10 on this one. But you throw a little bit money down on it. You have fun. You get to do something during June, July, even early August. But the point of a slow draft is so you can draft through the week. You don't have to set a time. You shouldn't have auto drafts. But yes, you need to take the initiative because the slow draft allows you to go to work and do your normal daily things you need to do and not have to worry about getting auto drafted. But yes, you need your notifications on because when you have that free moment, you need to make your pick. Don't hold the draft hostage during a best ball draft.
There's a level of trust that needs to be there for a slow draft to work. And honestly, if the world was full of Matt Mormons, I would love it because I would never do a time draft again. Because as much as I thoroughly enjoy the time drafts, I hate setting them up.
Yeah.
And this year in particular for me is going to be really rough because I've got stuff going on each of the 2 Saturdays before the season starts. So slow drafts are a great way to be able to kind of work it around everybody's schedule. You don't have to set a date for everybody to make it work. But there is a level of trust. There is a level of responsibility that does need to come into doing a slow draft. Tanner, as we kind of get things kicked off here, I did have a fun game for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
As you can see over my shoulder is Pikachu. And a staple of my childhood was, who's that Pokemon? So I've got a couple of fun who's that player questions here for you.
All right. I feel like I'm going to be bad at this, but let's do it.
I think you're going to get one of them for sure. I don't know if you're going to get the other one.
Okay.
I am the
Kyle Juszczyk.
No.
Oh.
These are both very fantasy relevant players
that
I feel like we haven't talked a whole lot about.
Okay.
I am the second wide receiver on my team being drafted for fantasy football this year.
Tyler Lockett.
No.
Damn.
My quarterback has never supported more than one top 30 wide receiver finish to a season in total points.
Oh, okay.
In my career, I have 3 top 24 wide receiver PPR weekly finishes. Meanwhile, my teammate, who is being drafted after me, had 3 of those last season. And all of mine came 2 seasons ago, I think. I just added that part in at the end there. I'm pretty sure all of his are 2 seasons ago. I don't think he had a last year. Maybe I should have added that part in. And by the way, the number 2 receiver for my quarterback ignore that part. Okay, so here's your 3 hints. Okay. I'm the second wide receiver being drafted from my team.
Okay.
My QB has never supported more than one top 30 wide receiver finish.
Okay.
And I have 3 top 24 weekly finishes. Meanwhile, my teammate being drafted after me had 3 last season. Who am I?
Wait, the wide receiver one's being drafted after him?
No. There is a third wide receiver on his team.
Got you.
That's being drafted after him. I am the second one. There is a first one that's being drafted well ahead of me. I am number 2. The one behind me had 3 top 24 finishes last season. I only have 3 in my career.
Oh, this is a toughie.
This is the one I thought you were going to get.
I'm just going to guess Christian Kirk.
No.
No, because the quarterback doesn't fit with
the
that.
quarterback doesn't fit for that one, does
Older
it?
quarterback?
Quarterback's been around for a little while now.
Michael Gallup.
No, but the right kind of age group of quarterback, though. And that's
Okay.
a good guess because of Brandon Cooks being behind him.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank
that was a good guess. I'll give you one more guess.
Cortland Sutton.
Elijah Moore.
Ah.
Elijah Moore was awful last year. He wasn't all that good 2 years ago. And yeah, Will Fuller, he had his injury problems. So maybe on a per game basis, he would have been better. But he never had a top 30 finish. And DeAndre Hopkins obviously always did. You've got big hopes for Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
I just want to point all that out for Elijah Moore.
And I think that's a fair point, but I think we're in a different circumstance. Like, I don't think we're comparing apples and apples here with Watson's career and Elijah Moore's career and just everything that I am expecting to click for Cleveland this year. I think it's kind of an apples and orange comparison, but it is good to bring up your point as well.
Also, Donovan Peoples-Jones is that third wide receiver, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other player. I was third last season in air yards per reception with a minimum of 50 catches.
Okay.
My new quarterback had the highest intended air yards per pass attempt of his career last season, up a full yard from his previous high. My new quarterback has produced back-to-back seasons with a wide receiver in the top 10 in PPR.
Chris Olave.
Nailed it! All right, there we go.
That was my first guess. I should have just said it after
the air yards one
clue, or the second clue. Yeah, that's who I was zeroing in on. But
yeah, I just think Chris Olave is weirdly flying under the radar, even though he's like a borderline top 12 wide receiver.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 11.
Yeah, I just feel like it's weird that he almost feels a little boring in a way at the moment, and I guess it's part of being linked to Derek Carr.
I mean, I took him I was very happy I got him in the third round of our best ball draft.
Certainly.
I started Kelsey, Amon-Ra, and Olave.
Yeah.
I was very happy with that.
All right, let's jump into the formats.
Okay. All right. So I just want to have a quick discussion here. It's more of a monologue, but whatever.
The floor is yours.
Really hop into it, but like, it's no secret that there's just an overwhelming amount of content in today's world covering fantasy football. It feels like there is a large gap left uncovered, though, by a lot of that content out there. There's a really big popular sites out there that you probably play your leagues on that they focus way too much on first round players and top 20 overall players, right? They focus too much on debating who should you take in the first round or who should you take first overall. And then there are just a lot of really smart and intelligent people out there who give great takes, but their content caters more towards people in the industry themselves and super geeks like me and Matt about fantasy, right? So when we started this podcast in 2021, we wanted to be able to find that middle ground for your average fantasy player, right? For your casual player. And when I say casual, I mean that as a compliment. I really do. You're the guy or girl who tunes back into August. When August rolls around, you tune back in, you cram all your prep in, and then you just enjoy the ride of the season, right? You're not the one who are picking up orphan dynasty teams in April, not checking on every positional coach and coordinator move or making projections. You actually enjoy your summer. You enjoy your life when there's not football going on. And then when the season comes back around, you're back in it and you love the ride from August to January, basically. Because of that, what we wanted to bring out of this podcast, and as we expanded into, more tweets and YouTube and all of that, what we wanted to really bring out was to find that middle ground for your average player, your casual player, who you need more information beyond the first round and beyond the second round, but also you don't necessarily need to know how the Texans wide receiver is going to chart out for projections, right? You don't need to know who to target between Nico Collins and John Mechie and Tank Dell. You probably don't even know who Tank Dell is, but so today we wanted to discuss different formats that we play in and how our strategies might change in those formats to give you a better idea of if you're playing in two leagues, but one's a 10-man with a 5 bench and then the other one's a 14 team with double flex, how should you approach those differently, if you should approach them differently? Well, that's really what we want to focus on, not just with this podcast, but with today's episode, is find that middle ground for you and just give you that extra bit of content that we kind of feel like is kind of missing out there. So we're going to roll through a lot of stuff, fab versus waivers, league sizes, bench sizes, all of that. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to get out there with what we're really trying to do with this podcast, right? I don't think you're going to put us up against people on Player Profiler and be like, those ADP guys are way smarter than those guys, right? That's not really going to happen, right? But we want to be able to find our audience, right? And I think that's kind of where we fit the best.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fantasy football analysts who are too shallow, right? The not going to name any names on any, but some of the bigger mainstream ones that do appeal to more of the average person, they don't go deep enough though. Sometimes, they don't.
Like, we're not going to write an article or do an episode on who should be number one between Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Christian McCaffrey. You're not going to hear us talk about that.
But to me, one of the other big problems with the fantasy football industry is that a lot of times I feel like they're just giving advice for each other. They're going too deep on these kinds of things. They're going to, they're making content that only other fantasy football, true diehards are wanting to check out.
Yeah.
So there's a big middle ground there of people who can use a little bit of help on their leagues, and they're not getting it from the people who go too shallow, but the people who go too deep, they go too deep. And, they don't need to care about a, Debbie League tight end that's coming out of his junior year of high school or something, that they kind of just need that middle ground. So that's really what we want to help fulfill.
Well, we want to find the average middle line, right? That's who we are. We're the Average Dudes podcast. We're just two average dudes that want to bring you fantasy content that kind of, that fits in there. We're not going to super geek out. Well, I mean, I might a little with my projections, but
and when we do, I think we do a good job of taking that super geeking into bite-sized chunks and kind of taking, okay, we super geeked out on these things, but here are the things that you need to know, and here's how you can apply it to your league.
Yeah. Like, I think of the guys that I play with. We're going into year 14, I think, of our home league. I was in high school when we started this, and I think of those guys. Like, if they're going to go on website A and be like, well, Jefferson's the best, but by the time they get to the 2-3 swing, well, what do? They don't even, they don't even realize the season Ramondre Stevenson had last year if he wasn't on their team. Or they don't think of Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave as these super breakout, worth the second round pick guys.
A lot of them probably aren't willing to take Bijan Robinson in round 1 just because he's a rookie.
He's a rookie. I've had that discussion with a gentleman I work with several times who's surprised I'm so high on Bijan as a rookie. And we want to kind of find that groove. So I think today's discussion of these different kinds of formats is going to help that, because strategy is going to change with certain drafts, or the approach will change. At the end of the day, we're always going to go with the best position or best player available strategy.
Yeah.
But we might move people up and down our rankings, though, depending on how we're, what format we're in. This first one's not necessarily drafting. Most of these are for drafting, but this one's not. And it's fab versus waivers. So fab is how I think every league should be. But there are some waiver leagues out there that I still play in. And, my Tuesday nights go a little bit quicker with those leagues. But fab is definitely the best. That's your free agent acquisition budget. Most of my leagues do $100. You don't put $100 in. It's just a fake $100. And you do a silent auction for waivers. So everyone has a shot at these players all year long, versus where if I just burned my number 1 waiver claim in week 4, week 5, Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, I don't even have a chance at getting his handcuff because I'm sitting at the bottom of the waiver list.
If fab has the advantage there of everybody's on a more even playing field, it's effectively like doing an auction instead of a snake draft. I should say this first of all. I do not believe every league should be anything. I am a big
I believe every league that I play in should be fab.
Honestly,
because it's a personal preference of mine. I just want to play in a league with fab.
I like, and we'll definitely get on that with PPR versus non-PPR. I like having that variety of things in there. I like the fact that I'm in a non-PPR, I'm in a full PPR, and I'm in a half PPR league. I like the fact that I've only got a few fab and more waivers, because that time commitment is definitely a thing, and the strategy that goes into it. So with fab, I think it's very important to save some money for later on in the season, right? Week 1, Eddie Royal is going to catch 3 touchdowns in 2013, right? If you go spend $100 on Eddie Royal because you caught 3 touchdowns on Monday Night Football in week 1 of 2013, that means later on in 2013, when Bernard Pierce takes over for Ray Rice, you've got no money to get Bernard Pierce. And then you're sitting there, you lost your Ray Rice, and Bernard Pierce went on to get this really nice season for somebody else, and you didn't even have a chance at him. And so for Fab, you need to it's a really hard balance to strike. You need to know when to go be aggressive, throw a couple extra bucks at a guy. You also need to know not to go crazy, let other people go crazy on some of those early players, especially like players I tend to really not go after are veterans that have that pop week, right? Like Eddie Royal is just like, it's the one that keeps on coming in my head of Eddie Royal catching 3 touchdowns week 1, right?
Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun Jackson's a great example of that.
I had to learn that lesson the hard way where Deshaun Jackson, he popped off week 1. I don't even remember who he was playing for.
Oh, it was like was it the Rams? It happened just 2 years ago.
I don't know if it was the Rams, or did he have a second stint with the Eagles?
Yes.
Okay, I think it was his second stint with the Eagles. And I paid up for him because I thought he was going to be a difference maker. I had to learn that the hard way. When an aging player, just a veteran anyways, that we don't have ranked very high to begin with for going into the season, don't think that week 1 or week 2 blow-up game is going to be their season. Now, if it's a young player, year 1 or year 2, I'll say even year 3 that hasn't truly broke out yet and they have that big game, they're definitely the player I'm more likely to pay up for.
I am
because that could be their season.
I am much more willing to pay up if Tank Dell and Michael Gallup have the same week 1 and it's really, really good. I'm far more likely to pay up for Tank Dell.
Yep. The other thing you should look at is, was it a big week or did they just have insane efficiency with what they had? If they were, if they had 3 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown on just 4 targets, that is not sustainable. That 75-yard catch that they had, and then the rest of the game, they were actually just 2 for 25, right? 4 fantasy points for a game, and then 1 big play gave them the other 14 and a half points, right? So look at volume as well.
Yep, and targets. So that's one of the first things I look for when I go to the waiver wire on Tuesdays, is I usually sort it by targets first, and I go there, and because if a guy gets 11 targets and caught 7 of them, that's far more likely to stick and be a part of the offense moving forward, right? Because the offense really made a concerted effort to go get that guy the ball compared to the guy who got 3 targets but happened to catch 1 that was really deep.
Yeah. And so I'm just looking at my rankings back to back. I have Jackson Smith and Jigba and Gabe Davis. If Gabe Davis has that 3 for 100 and a touchdown, and Njigba is like 7 for 75, Gabe Davis outscored him, but Jackson Smith and Jigba got 5 or 6 more targets and looks like he's going to be the focal point of that offense. I know what Gabe Davis is. He's a boomer bust type player. I may only get 2 or 3 more of those games the rest of the year out of him where he's over 12 points a game. And Jigba did it without the touchdown. I am more likely to go put a bid in for JSN than I am Gabe Davis there. So, and plus JSN being the younger player as well helps that case as well.
So that's for Fab on leagues where the waiver wire order does not reset, where once you make your claim, you go to the back of the line. Are you someone who tends to kind of hold on to that claim, or are you someone who kind of tends to put the claim in?
Depends on the player and depends on how my season's going. If I get off to a great start, I'm 4-1, 5-2, I am definitely more likely to hold on to that top claim and try and hold it until like the big injury happens, right? Until I need it. Now, if I start off 500, then screw it. If I think this guy can make an impact for me and be my every week flex player, 100%, I'll go ahead and burn it early and just try and work my way back up. But I am less likely to burn an early waiver on, that defense I want to stream, that one big blow up week by Gabe Davis. I don't think that's sustainable for the year, so I don't want to use my waiver claim on that. You have to kind of play it carefully because you also don't want to just hoard that number 1 claim and just take it with you to week 15 and you don't make the playoffs.
You don't want it to be your P-wing.
You don't want to take timeouts in the locker room, basically, right? So for the most part, if I have a good start, if I'm towards the top of that division, if I'm sitting pretty for the playoffs, yes, I want to hold on to that for when that big injury hits. If the RB5 goes down with a knee injury, I can swoop in and get his handcuff.
And that's typically going to be a running back. That's one thing I found with those leagues. For me personally, if I'm in a situation where I am holding on to it more, I'm going to be much more likely to cash it in on a running back that's got the replacement opportunity, because when the top wide receiver gets hurt, those targets tend to be more spread out versus when the top running back gets hurt, it tends to then just be the following up running back. Now, a lot of those guys are going to be owned. A lot of times those high-end handcuffs are going to get owned already, so they're not always going to be out there. I think I tend to be more of a use it over and over and over again. I think I tend to be a bit more of a shotgun approach to it. And I think part of the reason is, number one, it's being a little antsy. It's being a little antsy on my part. But I think also, like, I don't necessarily know for sure that is going to hit. Or also, if I'm waiting and buying my time, but I'm like third in the order, well, by the time that one good waiver wire guy hits who's super obvious, because that's the other thing too, if you're waiting to use it, you're waiting to use it on someone obvious. And so unless you are number one, and again, assuming everybody's being active in the league, right? That's the other part of it. But assuming that everybody's being active and that you're waiting, you get the third waiver spot and you're waiting to either take over first or use it on a guy, it's going to be an obvious guy. So I tend to be more of a kind of shotgun approach to it. I'm willing to get some more wrong on that than I am willing to get right.
I have definitely missed out on some players before. I remember the rookie year of a certain player who came in to a situation where he was going to be RB3 on an offense, and I decided not to use a waiver claim on him because it was too early in the year to burn it, and that player was Alvin Kamara, right? Like that's a situation where it's like, yep, definitely wish I had burned that. Justin Jefferson's rookie year was a guy that was out on a lot of waiver wires because he didn't have a great start because they had this established vet, Adam Thielen, who, was the big target hog there. That's a guy you want to use, if you use the waiver early and it was aggressive on him. Yes. I also factor my fab and my waiver wire positioning into the build that I had. So if I go 0 RB or hero RB, I know I'm probably going to have to spin some fab early or burn a waiver claim early to find my RB2. Because if you go true hero RB or true 0 RB, your RB2, you're probably streaming it early in the year until you can find a guy. I remember my home league, I went hero RB just a couple years ago with Mixon's was my RB1. And then I was very aggressive with my fab all year to go get your Khalil Herberts when Montgomery went down. To go get, I think I used Justin Jackson for the Chargers in the championship game or semifinal game, whenever his big breakout was. But I basically streamed my RB2 that entire season. And so I had to be aggressive with my fab all year. But also when I use fab and with waivers too, it's important to look ahead a week as well. And if you have that extra roster spot, don't just burn it. Go pick up the Monday night running back handcuff or the Sunday night running back handcuff. Use it wisely. Take a shot. You don't have to burn a waiver wire to add a guy.
Right.
You're basically trying to add a guy who's during open free agency who you're a week ahead on, right? So if it's Chargers and Raiders Sunday night football and Eckler's handcuff is available, go pick that guy up with your open waivers or your open roster spot. That way, if anything does happen to Eckler in that game, you don't have to worry about burning that early waiver positioning on the handcuff, or you don't have to worry about burning $20 a fab on a guy that may only play 1 or 2 games for you, So trying to look ahead at that is always a good strategy to save yourself your waiver spot or your fab.
One other just quick little tip and tidbit on waivers that do reset. And this is another thing too. Know your league settings. That's like the number one mistake that a lot of people make, I think, is they don't know what their league actually is. And so on leagues where it does reset every single week, where it's the standings order every single week and it resets, have a plan A, B, and C on some of those drops. Often I'll drop my kicker and I'll figure it out later. So let's say I'm
always a fan of that.
Yep. So let's say I'm 7th on the waiver order, right? And Najee Harris went down, but Jalen Warren's on the waiver wire, and Tank Dell had a big game, and let's go with Brandon Cooks had a big game. I'll set my waivers, drop the kicker, pick up Jalen Warren. Set another one, drop the kicker, pick up Tank Dell. Drop the kicker, pick up Brandon Cooks, because you don't know for sure. People might sleep on a Jalen Warren or something like that. And then you ended up lucking into him at the 7th. Don't just assume that you're not going to get him because he's the hot pickup. But then also be aware of the fact that you are 7th in the order you're probably not getting him. So set those backups up, because what will happen then is it just won't process. You just won't get Jalen Warren, but you get to drop Steven Hauschka and pick up Tank Dell.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to move a lot faster because
I
we're already
know.
half hour into the show. So
Maybe do we make this a two-parter?
let's just see how far we can get. We don't need to spend 10 minutes on every one. Let's try and
That's
just
true.
do 2 or 3 minutes on each one. I think we can get our good points across. Next one is league sizes. So most leagues are going to be 10 or 12, right? Not super drastic, but I do treat them a little differently. 8-man versus 14, it gets really drastic. 14 is about the extent that I will play in for redraft, that I think is still kind of fun. But I won't play in 8s anymore. I did, back when I was first playing, but I won't play in 8s anymore. But there's a lot of family leagues out there that are still 8s.
That's what mine
So,
is. My family league's an 8-team league, and so the way that, and that's also 2 quarterback. We'll get to that in a little bit. So that does change things too a little bit.
yeah.
For me, there's really 2 things that are different with 8-team leagues. Is number one, I'm willing to be more aggressive at quarterback and tight end,
Yep.
get those positional advantages. And number 2, I'm willing to be super risky on the waiver wire. I'm willing to drop players that I think might burn me later, because there's going to be other guys available. And then also that kind of goes into number 3, actually. Try to make 2-for-1 trades even more in an 8-team league. Do those in 10 and 12-team leagues too, where you trade 2 players for 1 better player. But in an 8-team league in particular, if you can trade 2 even good players for 1 great player, like if you can trade like your 5th and 6th round pick for a 2nd round pick, make that trade, because what's on the waiver wire to backfill is very good.
What I run into a lot when I play in like a 10-team league, especially, which the next topic is going to be bench size, but when I play in a 10-team league with 5 bench spots, it becomes very difficult when you have your entire bench filled with players you don't want to let go.
Mm-hmm.
When you can make a 2-for-1 and get that open roster spot, it makes a huge difference for your team flexibility week to week, being able to pick up that waiver wire guy, being able to pick up, that bye week replacement, because especially if it's a short bench, it's really hard to hold guys like last year, really hard to hold your Christian Watson, your Traylon Burks, Jamison Williams, guys like that. So, yeah, you can definitely be more aggressive on the waiver wire. Even my home league, I think I had Christian Watson rostered 3 different times. That was a 12-man league where, I think it was at least twice I had him rostered. I drafted him, dropped him, brought him back. I can't remember if I brought him back one more time or what. But, don't be afraid to let certain guys go, even if they have name value, but they don't have production value. Don't be afraid to let that guy walk and let him clog up someone else's bench. The last thing you want is your roster cloggers. You want to have the flexibility, especially 8 or 10-team league, to move on from a guy and be able to add and drop freely with that last bench spot. Now, when I get to 12 and 14 team leagues, like you said earlier, smaller leagues, I definitely want to invest in the one play positions, quarterback, tight end. If I can get the Kelsey Mahomes stack in the 10-team league, I'm very happy with that, because just naturally your multi positions are going to be easier to find on waivers.
Well,
Not
and the
not
other side,
necessarily easy, but just easier.
the other side of that coin too is you will have a higher chance of playing against a team with a. If you have David Njoku in an 8-team league, you're far more likely to be facing a team that has a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews, or if Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson are right, versus in a 14-team league. If I have David Njoku, I'm far more likely to be playing against a team who has a Greg Dulcich, who has a Tyler Higbee. There's not as likely of a chance on a week-to-week basis of me facing a team that has an advantage over me.
Well, you got to think 8-team league, your first 2 rounds are your top 16. 12-team league, it's your top 24. So your RB1s and your wide receiver ones are going to be a lot closer to each other. So you need to find edges where you can find them. And that's the spot where you can definitely find it. When I go to 12 and 14 team leagues, I am much more likely to not invest as heavily in both of those positions, right? If I get Kelsey, I'm probably going to try and end up with Tua or Watson at quarterback, right? But if I invest in Mahomes, well, I'm probably not getting Kelsey or Andrews, right? I'm probably going to look for my Dulcich Higbee range at tight end.
Correct. Do you want to go to bench sizes?
Yeah, and we kind of covered that a little bit. 5-man bench, it's a lot tougher to stash people. It really sucks the 5-man bench. I love playing it that 7-man bench if I can go farther out. 7 plus IRs, I think, is perfect for redraft. I'm able to stash a couple positions. I'm able to have maybe my running back handcuff. More importantly, one of my opponent's handcuffs. And then I can give myself a little depth at quarterback or at tight end if I need to. If I'm rostering Tua and I have 7 bench spots, I'm probably going to roster a second quarterback just because the Tua's concussions from the previous year, right? But if I have a 5-man bench, I'm rolling the dice with Tua because he's going to be my only quarterback unless I have to make a change and go pick up someone else.
Yeah, and I think too with the 5-man bench, it's harder to do kind of late season planning versus with a 7-player bench or more. I'm really willing to look at matchups late in the season of the playoffs, even with DSTs, right? Like if
Yeah.
it's like week 10 and I know I'm in the playoffs, that's when you really can start looking ahead at the playoff schedule and seeing, well, hey, the Chargers defense, they've got 3 matchups in the playoffs against really crummy offenses. Let me go ahead and stash that. It's really hard to have those stashes on a 5-team bench.
Yeah, I can look at we talked about in the previous episode, and I was talking about Sky Moore. I can try and get Sky Moore and Richie James and have full intention of them just sitting on my bench for the first couple weeks of the season. I don't have to worry about them making an impact on my fantasy team for a while. I can stash those guys. My Elijah Moore share, I can grab Elijah Moore. I don't have to worry about him performing right away in the season. 5-man bench, those are very precious roster spots. If a guy's not performing for you by week 2, you're probably going to have to make a move, whether it be injury or, maybe you took Najee Harris in the into the first or beginning of the second last year and he's not performing for you. You got to go get that impact running back. You're going to have to cut ties with your Elijah Moore share to go get that waiver wire running back now. So your bench spots are a lot more precious for you. You definitely can't afford to be as patient when injuries pile up, when bye weeks pile up. But yeah, that 7-man bench, maybe I grab the Eagles defense and they're by far the number 1 defense in the league. Bye weeks come around. I have a spare bench spot. I can now get my streaming defense for their bye week and hold the Eagles. It's become so much harder with a 5-man bench.
Do you play in any tight end premium leagues?
Well, I do now.
Oh, do you?
Our best ball league.
Is it? I didn't even notice. Oh, this is what I was just talking about.
It's half.
Know your scoring.
Half PPR, half point for first down, half point tight end premium. So when I go to tight end premium, obviously Kelsey gets a boost.
Right.
He is probably my player 4 at that point. Like I'm taking him over Eckler, especially if I'm drafting now. I'll take him over Eckler, maybe over McCaffrey. Maybe. That one's kind of a toss up, but I'll definitely take him over I think over Tyreek.
It boosts Kelsey.
What
does it do for the middle ground though?
It makes me more interested in my Tyler Higbee. It makes me more interested in that guy that I think is going to go get me like each week 4 for 45 is his floor. 8 for 60 and a touchdown is probably a ceiling. But those volume catches, like your Zach Ertz back in the day, right? He may only catch 4 or 5 touchdowns on the season. You don't have to rely on as much. The guy that's getting a decent amount of target share, it allows me to try and target one of those guys late if I don't get Kelsey.
Because tight end premium, it is usually a boost to either catches or yardage for tight ends. Typically catches, I feel like. If it's a PPR league, it'll be like a 1.5 PPR for tight ends. It's not a format I particularly like, but I'm okay with it. Hey,
I like mixing it in. I like
sure.
having it as my I have 1 or 2 tight end premium leagues. I like mixing that in across the board.
That's fair. And I do like, I have Njoku and Dulcich. I think that's perfectly fine at tight end premium. Yeah. So not knowing my league setting didn't totally screw me this time. But
one thing it does for you is obviously it gives the Kelsey owner even a bigger advantage. But the other thing it does for you is if you don't have Kelsey or Andrews, you don't necessarily have to plug and play a guy and cross your fingers for that touchdown so he's relevant that week. He can grab 5 or 6 catches and have you a nice week, nice fantasy week, even if he doesn't find the end zone. So, yeah, it definitely boosts Kelsey up for me. And then it just makes doesn't really boost up the tight ends for other spots for me, but it does I do want to look for different guys. If I'm playing like a non-PPR league, I don't even really think I want Tyler Higbee, right? I think I'd rather grab Greg Dulcich or, Njoku. I'm probably out on Evan Ingram if it's non PPR, right? But that tight end premium definitely does help me out with those guys there. Pat Fryermuth, and Dalton Schultz. I'm a little bit more interested in those guys. In tight end premium, I'm less interested in Cole Kmet, Taysom Hill.
Yeah, Taysom Hill is actually
Chigo
a great
Conquo.
example there because, he doesn't really catch the passes. So his nothing weeks are going to be even more nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned non-PPR, and we'll touch on that real quick. Non-PPR versus PPR versus half. For me, PPR really overpowers wide receivers almost too much to me. And so to me in PPR leagues, I really am embracing going zero RB versus I think in non-PPR, it balances it really well in that running backs, the high-end running backs outscore the high-end wide receivers, which is good because high-end running backs inherently have more risk than high-end wide receivers because running backs come with an injury issue. And so to me, non-PPR is more balanced in that regard. But it changes some players in between, right? Like you mentioned, the volume plays a Keenan Allen, right, isn't as good. But also, Keenan Allen doesn't become a nothing in non-PPR, though. Keenan Allen is still a useful wide receiver, but maybe you would rather have I think I'd still have him over his own teammate, Mike Williams. I do. I think that there's not enough of a change there. I'm struggling with the guy.
But you're going to come up with like a Keenan Allen. Do I start Keenan Allen or Gabe Davis this week?
It's always Keenan Allen, depending on the matchup.
Not
it's always
PPR.
Absolutely, it's always Keenan Allen. It's always
not
Keenan
necessarily.
Allen. It's not such
necessarily.
To me, it's not such a change. To it's not that extreme to me.
No, because you're more likely you have a better chance of chasing the touchdown upside in non PPR. Because Keenan's just a volume guy. So unless he all of a sudden has a spike touchdown season, he's going to get you a decent floor, but he never really has the ceiling play in non because he's not going to get 8 to 10 points just on catches alone. Whereas Gabe Davis might have 90 and a touchdown on 3 or 4 catches.
If
right?
you do that, I think you're still going to find yourself getting burned too much if you approach it that way.
I'm just talking middle of the season. Early in the season, obviously, you're going to be starting Keenan Allen, but I think you're going to get to a point in the season where you're going to have to make those tough decisions. To me, non's just not as fun. Non-PPRs and not having much fun. I don't like playing where it's a race to 85 points. So for me, it's always going to be PPR. It does even expand the playing field a little bit as well. Like Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to be nearly as good once you go into non. Like I said, Keenan Allen. There's fun streamers. Dalton Schultz, like he can be a fun streaming tight end this year.
Those guys are still fun streaming tight ends.
No, like
absolutely,
he's kind of taking the fun out of it at that point for me.
I don't see how it takes the fun out of it, but we've talked about that many times. We very much disagree. The big thing to me though is the risk and reward of the running backs in non PPR versus in wide receiver, or I'm sorry, in PPR. There's no risk. Just take the wide receivers. Wide receivers are far less likely to bust. They're far less likely to get hurt, and they score as many or more points than the high-end wide receivers. To me, in PPR, it heavily weighs take wide receivers early, take wide receivers often, versus in non, it's a bit more of a balance.
Yep. I will happily settle in the middle and just play half PPR.
Half PPR is good.
Along. Yep.
Half is good.
So I say we just touch on the last two, and then we call it an episode, and we can get into the actual types of drafts later.
Yeah.
So Superflex versus one quarterback. Basically, yeah, you're gonna have to invest in quarterback earlier.
Well, a Superflex is where you have an additional flex spot that a quarterback can slot into.
Correct. It's essentially a two-quarterback league, but you don't have to start a second quarterback at the flex. It's a flex plus quarterback. So it's 2 quarterback, but if you get in a pinch with injuries and buys, you can put another position there. But pay it for quarterback. Don't play it cute. Like for me, I did a best ball draft. I had the number 3 overall pick. The top 8 quarterbacks are all going in the first round once you go to Superflex. That's just how it's going to go. Get an elite quarterback if you can in the draft. And then, like myself, I started 103. I took Josh Allen. It came back around in the second. I took Tua. Like that was my start. There's going to be values at receiver, and at running back throughout the draft because guys are getting pushed down at positions because quarterbacks are getting pushed up. but you don't want to find yourself with Sam Howell and Derek Carr as your QB 2 and 3. That's the other point. Take at least 3 quarterbacks.
Yep.
You're going to need at least 3. Don't be afraid to take 4 if you feel like you have like a Brock Purdy or Sam Howell, the guys that may not make it the entire year via injury, or just like if I take Sam Howell, I don't trust he's going to be a starter week 17, right? Jacoby could take that job. So let me grab Desmond Ridder as well.
And in certain situations, like if it's a deep enough league to begin with, if I have Jalen Hurts, I might handcuff my quarterback with a Marcus Mariota. I'm not opposed to doing that in a Superflex 2 QB league. If it's a 12 team, and if there's enough bench spots, then I think there comes a point where I'm willing to do that. It has to be a backup QB where I look at the situation and I say, like, if they step in, I see upside, which is why I think Mariota in Philly is like the one example I can really give you. Tyler Huntley also probably would be an example of that. At least
Taylor Heineke, he's been a fantasy in a 2 QB league. He's probably startable if he steps in,
Yeah.
Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton was startable as a 2 QB guy.
Trey Lance.
Well, that's QB 3.
Yeah. But that's a good point. Now,
but normally
another thing with those is yes, make sure you take 3. Also, value safety a little bit more among your QB2s. When we talk about quarterbacks, by and large, we talk about them in a one quarterback sense, and we talk purely about upside among your QB2s. So that's why we'll say Anthony Richardson is an amazing QB2. But in a 2 QB league, Anthony Richardson still is an amazing 2BQ option. Maybe that's not the perfect example of one, but I'm more willing to have a Jared Goff, a high floor play as my QB2 versus maybe Jordan Love, right? Like I think Jordan Love has some upside, but there's not much safety there. I think I'm willing to have a Stafford over him. I'm willing to have a Rodgers over him.
Yeah.
In a 2 QB league.
Wilson, Goff, Stafford, Geno. That's a great range.
Yeah. Grab one of those guys for sure.
Grab, yeah.
And also, I think that's pretty much it for that. So then the one last thing, I feel like the standard leagues are 1 QB, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex. So I love double flex leagues. Mm-hmm. Double flex is probably my favorite thing to incorporate because I think it does add to the play pool a little bit. I don't really approach my draft too much differently other than the fact that I feel like I need to grab 1 extra wide receiver to play in a spot.
Yep. Especially if I'm in a half PPR or higher, any kind of point per reception league, I am much more likely to go hero RB or 0 RB. I'm more of a hero RB guy.
Yeah.
But I'm much more likely to be able to land a hero RB strategy with the double flex because going into this, I am fully planning on starting 4 wide receivers if it's half PPR, especially if it's full PPR. Mm-hmm. Now I will zag if the league is zigging and taking a bunch of wide receivers. I just did it in the best ball where I took Bijan in the first round. And then in the third round, I took Jahmyr Gibbs because he was my highest rated. Like the range of receivers, my highest was Keenan Allen. And I was like, he'll probably make it back to me in the 4th round. And he did. So I actually started RB wide receiver RB in that best ball. Because like I said, it just felt like everyone was mostly zigging. I'll zag. So I fully plan on trying to go wide receiver heavy in that format. But again, if it doesn't work that way, I will happily, what's the saying? Be water, right? Flow where the river takes you, basically. If there's a rock there, it can't go through the rock. It goes around the rock.
Cool.
Be water. It just makes me think of the scene in Jurassic Park where he's pouring the water on the hand. You've seen Jurassic Park, right?
I have been there when it was on. With a group
in the
of people.
Room. You haven't been to Jurassic Park.
No, but I was in the room and it was on TV and other people were watching it, okay. But other people were kind of just hanging out and not really paying attention.
It's phenomenal. It's one of my favorite movies. One of the most rewatchable movies out there. And then 3 wide receiver leagues. People are going to put more emphasis on not falling behind at wide receiver. So there is going to be value at running back. And so again, don't be afraid to go hero or 0 RB. I believe I did one where Mixon fell into my lap in round 4 and that was my running back. Right. And then I'm just going to go pound the late RB strategy of Charbonnet and Kendry Miller and Tank Bigsby,
and just
grab a bunch of them.
And draft a million handcuffs.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of 3 wide receiver. Last thing I want to touch on, I played in this type of league last year, and it was the worst. No flex. No flex is like, I would rather it be negative PPR than ever play in a no flex league again.
Yeah.
That was the absolute worst. But if you do find yourself in a league that does not flex anyone, you need to invest at tight end. You need to, like, Kelsey might be my 101
Yeah,
in that league because it's such a big positional advantage. But if you don't have a difference maker at that position, you're just kind of out. Like, you're not going to be good if you don't have a difference maker at enough positions. So pay a premium for Kelsey. Like I said, Kelsey might be my 101 in that format.
And part of the reason to backfill on that is, let's say you miss out on all 12 of the top 12 wide receivers. Well, you're still starting 2 guys in the top 36 in that case.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the trade-off there. Is that's why you're willing to take Kelsey, not just because of the positional advantage, but also you're not going to be at that much of a disadvantage at other positions.
Like, I remember last year with that team, I had Breece Hall, and when he got hurt, I was just screwed at running back. I ended up making a trade that landed me Kittle because I was streaming tight end, and this was Kittle with Purdy. And I traded for Deontay Foreman for the Panthers because he was actually producing at running back. And I just, you almost can't stream, when there's only 24 running backs being started, you don't want to be streaming running back 31. You're falling too far behind. So, yeah, like I remember Brandon Ayuk was just rotting away on my bench because I could not play him at all because I had CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle. Like, Ayuk was worthless in that league, but you can't drop him. But he's just rotting away on your bench. So no flex is the absolute worst. Never do it. It completely takes all the fun out of it because you can't do anything with your roster construction. You have to just play it super bland, super blah. Draft, that is the one league where it's like, just draft your starting roster. Honestly.
Take the kicker. Just take the kicker.
I still did not draft a kicker in that.
Of course.
I drafted with my last pick. I took Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco.
Oh, there you go.
But I couldn't hold on to him long enough for him to be relevant, and I ended up dropping him.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I think we'll save, because we're already 52 minutes in this, we'll save best ball guillotine auction for another episode. That way we can kind of dive a little bit deeper in this. And we don't want to go over an hour here. Another thing we're going to look at another episode is in-season Dynasty, because Dynasty is more of an off-season thing. Dynasty is a lot of fun in the off-season. A lot of trading going on. You get the rookie picks. It is a lot of fun. But in-season, it's a little more automated, right? I don't think there's as much happening in season as there is out of season, but there's still a lot of strategy that needs to happen. Then you still have a lot of stuff you got to be able to do. So we're going to look at those leagues. And maybe we'll talk about some other fun leagues like Vampire League and things like that. So we'll just kind of see what happens with that. But that will be the next episode. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode where we went through draft strategies and other types of strategies here. You can follow along with us on Twitter at ADP Dudes. Go find our YouTube at Average Dudes Podcast, or simply just search ADP Dudes. You can even go follow us individually. I'm at Tanner Ward 7. Matt is at Real Matt Mormon, 2 N's on the end. And let us know what you think of the show. Leave us a 5-star review. And yeah, Matt, you got anything else before we sign off?
Goodbye.
All right, nice and simple. All right, thanks everyone for stopping in. We'll see you next time.